So it was really cool to be able to do this with Leslie Kane. Again, she was the contributing author to that New York Times article about ATIP, which kind of exploded at the end of 2017, and it's been featured on a lot of media, a lot of news reports and things since, and it's still a huge issue. There's a lot still coming down the line that I think we can find out more about, not just the Pentagon program, but how involved other governments have been, and where this issue is going to lead us here in the next several years. So with that, I'd like to transition over and introduce a friend of mine who I've known for years now, and this is really great because when I met him, he wasn't really involved in writing a lot about the UFO subject at all, but he came up and said, "You're into this stuff, right?" I said, "Well, yeah." And so he says, "I need someone else to talk to about this. My coworkers are tired of hearing me talk about UFOs all the time." So I thought that was great. And so for the last about 2 years or so, he's been really involved with different articles that have come out, and he's been writing a lot. At first, he was involved with some other groups, and then he was one of the few people who had foreknowledge of that article coming out in the New York Times that has now really become like something that has set a new standard for people and their interest in this subject. And since for the last year, been working on his own independent blog, website, and article-based research forum, which is the Silva Record. And so you guys are going to hear a lot about these different articles that he's written about on his website. And so I'm honored to have my friend Danny Silva come up and share with you guys. Danny, come on up. One other thing I'd like to share about is that he's done great work of chronicling a lot of the reports about ATIP, to the Stars Academy, a lot of this stuff, and we got to meet up with Lou Elizondo, who was the main guy behind ATIP for a lot of those years. And a lot of people have different ideas about him or who he was, his background, but I think Danny will share a bit more about what he thinks about all this and kind of where it's led in his work. So take it away.
Thanks. I'm basically just going to go through a bunch of my blogs and share some of my opinions. If you guys want me to repeat anything, let me know. And at the end, we'll take questions. That's really cool that Daniel was able to interview Leslie Kane. She wrote the original New York Times piece, and then she wrote another one this year about the East Coast events. A lot of this is focused on the West Coast Tic Tac and the East Coast gimbal. I'm going to show those videos right now, actually. But Leslie Kane is not an easy interview to get. So congratulations to Daniel for that. That's really amazing that he was able to speak to her. Okay, these are the original government videos that were leaked. These aren't the To the Stars versions with the extra graphics on them. I just wanted to save us some time. So these were actually leaked, and this has no. This one has no audio and has nothing else. This is the Tic Tac.
And this one was from Commander Fravor's game, his gun cam, right?
Right. This is actually, it was Chad Nuts Underwood is actually the one that took this. Fravor
right.
was the first in the air, and he got up really close to it. And then that group landed, and then another group took off from the Nimitz aircraft carrier, and Chad Underwood was the one that actually filmed it. And this changed everything. This was the first government UFO video, and then you'll see it shoot off to the left in a second here. And that was supposed to be incredible speeds that it shot off at. That really did change everything. This is the gimbal. There are some curse words on these videos because the pilots are so surprised. They don't know what they're seeing.
This is a fucking drama, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Who come ass in? My gosh. We're going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west. Oh, they did. test though, is it? It's not. Yeah, I don't understand. Well, if there's another thing, it's roasted.
So that's the gimbal video. That one's more controversial than the Tic Tac. Some people think that there's a prosaic explanation for it. It was rotating though, and it was going against wind, as you could hear. And then they say there's a fleet of them on the ASA, which means they also saw a whole fleet of other craft. There's been some stories recently about how the Navy is able to trick radars, so that could have been happening, but we don't know. But there was a lot of stuff seen with actual eyeballs. And then here's the third one. It was released in March of 2018. It's the Go Fast video. I think there's also press release.
No, I took an honor card. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow. Look at the fly.
So the pilots are freaking out. They don't know what they're seeing. And it just goes to show you that these pilots that have been in the air for a long time, and if they're surprised by it, then a lot of other people are also. So I'm just going to go through a bunch of blogs now. I'm going to skip over some, but because I have limited time. But the first one is Dr. Eric Davis, who's part of Earth Tech International, which is located in Austin. People think that a lot of stuff only goes on in other states, but actually there's a lot of going on in Austin. Earth Tech International is ran by Dr. Hal Puthoff. He's a member of To the Stars Academy, and they're a big deal to say the least. They study UFO materials and do a whole lot of other things. During an interview with George Knapp, Eric Davis was talking about other crashes that he thought were real. And some people debated me on this, that there's always debunkers and skeptics and people that just don't agree with you, and that's fine. But the way I understood it when Eric Davis said this is he's saying that the Del Rio crash was actually a real crash that happened. So I'll read you some of these quotes. George Knapp said, "That makes it sound like there is something else to analyze or to reverse engineer." And Eric Davis said, "Yeah, do that." I would say, if you're going to throw your bets on Roswell, your bet's really good. Del Rio, Texas, that was a 1950s case, that was another one. And there are other ones I won't bring up because those are still classified. So without knowing that that's the case, I won't talk about it any further, but we have crash retrievals, and they've been analyzed, and unfortunately our laboratory diagnostic technologies and our material sciences and understanding the physics that we had were not advanced enough to be able to make heads or tails of what it is, or what they had their hands on. A lot of what's happening right now is these metamaterials that they're finding. It's UFO debris. Some people like Eric Davis have now came out and said that they have whole craft. And the more science gets on board with this, it's going to convince skeptics, because we already all believe what's going on, but we're trying to get the public to believe also, so we don't have to feel like we're chastised for sharing our opinions or what we know. So here's another blog I wrote in November 2018. It's just speaking about a lot of things that were going to come to pass. Some of them already have. I'll show you this quick video of the Atom Research Project, which is To the Stars Academy, but it's them focusing on UFO materials.
Grabbing this stuff, I think is going to, it has the potential, if it ends up being real, it has potential for being A, very dangerous that we have it, and B, shake things up quite a bit.
I find it very interesting that there are people out there who absolutely are convinced that they've seen what they've seen, and for that reason I'm willing to listen. And again, that doesn't mean run to the hills with your hand in the air screaming that the aliens are coming or aliens are coming. No one's even mentioned the word aliens. We're not talking about aliens. We're not talking about extraterrestrial life. We're simply saying that there is something out there in our airspace we don't control. We don't know what the hell it is. And so if it's not the eyewitness reports, and it's not the videos, and it's not the electro-optical data, it's not the electromechanical data, well, all right, how about material? Will that be enough? What you all are agreeing to do is to allow us, TTSA, to maintain temporary control of the material for the purposes of scientific analysis and research. And I have additional protection here. I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's all lead shielded, RF, everything. We can continue to protect it rather than getting to fly home. I get to drive 18 hours now with this stuff. There's a little bit of an uneasiness about carrying this stuff around, not really knowing what it is, where it's from. I think the possibility is exciting. Now, it could turn out to be a part of an alternator of an 1884 Cadillac. All right, you really never know. But I think we have to handle all these things as if they are legitimate. Hi, Lisa. Code 2. Repeat. Code 2.
That's Earthquake in Austin right there.
I made it very clear to the owners of the material that the material was going to be, it was going to be analyzed from a physical perspective, physical properties, and then it was going to be looked at from molecular characteristics and structure, and then depending on what those results came back, we may look at its nuclear properties, i.e. the actual atomic structure itself. There appears to be some trace amounts of some very interesting elements, and we have to follow the data and the facts. Let's see where that data leads us. I don't want to speculate or go down that path because, obviously the likelihood of it being from here is probably a lot greater than the likelihood of it being not from here. But nonetheless, it's a possibility. In the end, really, this is a journey about all of us and for all of us, not just a particular company or a group of guys that are going out and collecting a bunch of rocks. How we take this information, whether it winds up being real or not real or somewhere in the middle, ultimately it's a conversation that people need to have amongst themselves on how as a society we feel about the notion that maybe we're not the only ones.
So that's kind of an introduction to their Atom project. Here's a quote from Elizondo speaking to George Knapp. He says there's a lot more videos, and no, he's not at liberty to release those. That would be the government's job to do that if they choose to do so. I've been hearing more than rumors about the gimbal, which was the second video. It cuts off right before the craft shoots off at high rates of speed. It's too bad that the public isn't able to see that part of the video. It probably would have convinced a lot of people. Maybe eventually it'll come out. I'm not really sure, but there's a whole lot of videos that the government has, and unfortunately we haven't got to see but 3 of them. Here he's talking more about the gimbal, and he says, what makes it even more interesting is when you hear the audio, the individuals say there's an entire fleet of them. I cannot go into detail why that's important. I hope at some point the details of that will come out, but if it will not come out, it won't be from me. It isn't just one, and if you know the backstory behind the incident, you're just looking at a very short video, maybe 30 or 35 seconds worth, but there's an entire story, weeks and weeks and weeks worth, that goes behind that video, and that's why it's so compelling. There was a religious faction in the government. Some people call them the Collins elite, but they weren't happy with a lot of what was going on. There wasn't only ATIP program, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. There was also OSAP, which was Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program. And OSAP studied a lot more than just UFOs. They were studying Skinwalker Ranch, and they were studying the paranormal in general. There's been a lot of disinformation, basically by Pentagon spokespersons and things like that, saying that this list of 38 reports was all that OSAP did, but they did a whole lot more than that. There's over 50 people working on that, and I heard there was about a dozen working on ATIP. So after the religious backlash of OSAP happened, some of the funding was cut, and they were able to get other funding after that. But after that, they only basically focused on UFOs, and they weren't doing a lot of this other paranormal extra stuff. And then George Knapp says, it's true there's a group of people in high-level positions, and one of these days their names are going to come out, and the steps that they took to kill the program to siphon the money away. Jeremy Corbell, who made the Skinwalker Ranch documentary. He made the Bob Lazar documentary. He's a great source of information. One of the stories I've been following is the existence of other programs. Right now we only know about ATIP and OSAP, but there's a lot more, and I'll get into more of that in a second. But Jeremy said this, I will tell you this now and I'll be proven right later, but I'll put it on record now that there are multiple UFO programs going on at this time, and they're not being named right now, and there are 4 in particular that will probably come out. So that was kind of a bombshell to hear someone go on record and say that knows, to say that there's other programs. One of my blogs here is about the Holloman Air Force Base event, if you're not familiar with that. It's pretty crazy sounding. Not everyone agrees on what happened, but supposedly aliens landed and talked to officials, government officials. So Jeremy believes it happened. People like Dr. Putoff have been interested in it. I don't know if he actually believes it occurred, but it's a story that's been in UFO lore for a long time, and if it turns out to be true, people will discover and it'll change everything. This was a quick blog I wrote about basically just famous people talking about their UFO experiences. Has everyone seen the Jimmy Carter stuff? No. All right, I'll play here's a quick Jimmy Carter one.
Tell me about the time you once saw a UFO.
Well, I was the district governor of 56 Lions clubs in southwest Georgia, and I had to visit all the Lions clubs and make a speech. And I was outside a school lunchroom one night, right before sundown. It was getting dark, and we were getting ready to eat supper. And I and about 25 men were standing around, and all of a sudden, in the western sky, we saw a strange light coming to us, a round light. And it got closer and closer, and right above the pine trees, it stopped. And then it began to change colors from blue to red to white. And then it stayed there for a while. We were all aghast. We didn't know what it was. And then it just disappeared into the west. That was the end of it. So it was a genuine UFO in that it was an unidentified flying object, but I have never thought and still don't think it's possible for, creatures from Mars to come here and visit us and go back home.
There's so many famous people that have seen things. Fife Symington, I'm not going to play his, but he was there for the Phoenix sites. Dennis Kucinich, not only did he see a craft, but apparently he had like an information download and they belittled him, and he may have even lost the presidency at the time. I think I'll skip that one. Edward Bell Bruno, who's a NASA scientist, he did a anonymous interview with Whitley Strieber, and then it came out later that this was him. But I would definitely, if you have time, this is an hour or 2 hours long interview. It's really amazing. He's talking about having beings in his room. He's talking about them basically giving him information downloads to help him with his NASA work. That's the case in some of these instances where scientists will feel like they're getting nudged in the right direction by the phenomenon in their work. Whether that's true or not, who knows. Astronaut Gordon Cooper saw a UFO. This is also an hours-long interview that's really interesting. Here's an astronaut, Deke Slayton. So this is a guy that knows about aerospace tech, and he knows what he saw.
And about what he saw on a test pilot flight in 1952. Deke Slayton.
As I closed on this thing, well, it looked like a weather balloon, and that's what I presumed it was. Then I had plenty of gas and time, so I decided I'd just come back around and make a pass on it. And I got around where I should have been coming back on this thing. All of a sudden, it didn't look like a balloon anymore. It looked like a saucer sitting on an edge, at a 45-degree angle. I didn't have any good camera film on board, unfortunately, or I shot some pictures of it. And about that time, I guess whatever it was, for whatever reason, just took off climbing at about a 45-degree angle and just accelerated and disappeared. I obviously couldn't follow with an old piston engine fighter. So I turned around and went home.
That's an astronaut, we have the Navy pilots. I'm running short on time, but here's David Fravor talking about seeing the Tic Tac. Art Bell, radio host, of course, saw one. John Lennon saw one in New York City. Dan Aykroyd seen a bunch. And the Kurt Russell one is really interesting. He was there flying during the Phoenix Lights, and he saw them up close in the air. Do you want to take a break?
We can get it for a few more minutes and then we'll break.
All right, I'll show the the David Fravor interview, because this is really important and it's historic, really.
UFOs have been the stuff of conspiracy theorists for decades, often mocked for talking about it, but maybe they shouldn't be mocked. Commander David Fravor spent 18 years as a naval aviator pilot. In 2004, he had an unforgettable encounter with an aircraft he said was defying the laws of physics. Former Commander Fravor joins us tonight. Thanks all for coming on tonight. Tell us what you saw.
Well, we had launched on a routine training mission. When we joined up, we were told that the event was going to be canceled and that we were world tasking, and we were sent out to the west. Now, take in mind that this has taken place about 100 miles southwest of San Diego, between San Diego and Ensenada, Mexico, on a clear, perfect day, blue waters. We get out to the spot where they tell us it's at. We start looking around, and both airplanes see a disturbance in the water and a white 40-foot long tic-tac shaped object just hovering above the water, going forward, back, left, right. There's no rotor wash, there's no wings, nothing. So as we drive around in a clockwise flow, we get to about the 9 o'clock position, and I said, well, I'm going to go down and check it out, and the other jet is going to stay high. So as we go down, and when we get to the 12 o'clock position, it starts to mirror us. So it's in a clockwise flow, and it's on the opposite side of the circle from us. And we continue this. It's in a climb, we're in a descent. We're getting a great look at it. This whole thing takes about probably up to 5 minutes from the time we show up. I get over to the 8 o'clock position. It's at about the 2 o'clock position, and I decide I'm going to go and see what it is, and it's about 2,000 feet below me. And I cut across the circle, and as I get within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerates to the south in about 2 seconds and disappears.
What would you estimate the speed?
Well above supersonic. It like a bullet out of a gun, it took off.
So from what you know about aerodynamics, mechanics, physics, should this be possible, what you saw?
Not with the technology that we have today. Not at all.
Even now, even 13 years later, is there anything that you know of capable of this kind of behavior?
No, there's nothing I know of. I mean, when we saw the video with the IR, it has no exhaust, no discernible things of anything form of propulsion. And this thing came from a dead hover over the water, just kind of moving around, to a climb up to about 12,000 feet to rapidly accelerating away in a climb, and in less than 2 seconds it was gone. And you figure you're talking 50 miles of visibility, and you can easily see an object that size easily out to 10 miles, and it just disappeared in seconds.
What would be the effects on a human pilot of the G-forces involved in that altitude change?
Well, the altitude would be bad. It would be the acceleration of the object.
That's right.
Honestly, I wanted to fly it.
Yeah,
talking to some physicists, they don't think the human body could handle that kind of force with that acceleration.
It doesn't sound like the human body could. So bottom line, what do you think this was?
I believe, as do the other folks that were on the flight when we visually saw it, that it was something not from this world.
When presumably you expressed that belief to your superiors, what did they say?
Actually, we caught a lot of grief getting back to the boat, and it got passed off as an event that no one could explain. Now, keep in mind, they had been tracking these for 2 weeks prior to us seeing it, and this was the first time that manned airplanes had been airborne when the objects appeared.
This feels like a really big story to me. It's not exactly clear why Vladimir Putin's more interesting than this. I think this seems like a big deal.
A lot of people question why Tucker Carlson is doing all these interviews, and I don't make a political statement by showing him, but the fact is he's covering it more than almost anyone on the national scene. So whatever you think about politics, I kind of leave that out. My main politics is trying to get the UFO stuff to the public, but Tucker Carlson is giving people more of a platform than anyone else, basically. Here's an article I wrote. Basically, it's highlighting that what we saw in the gimbal video when it starts to rotate is a common occurrence of all these UFOs that are rotating. Bob Lazar is one of the first people that said that it has to do with propulsion. It rotates, And if you go into here, this blog, you'll be able to see some of his comments about it and why he thinks that's the case. But I'm fascinated by UFOs that rotate because it's matching up with just a lot of what we're hearing now. This next one, EarthTech isn't the only company that's studying UFO material. There's a lot of them. Some of them don't really talk a whole lot. A friend of mine, he goes by an alias, his name is Twitter user Jay, he tipped me off on this. There's a man named George Hathaway, and he's a major player behind the scenes. This was one of the first articles about him. Basically, Jay went on their website and he found all this crazy stuff that no one knew was there. I don't have time to talk about it all, but they are doing field investigations of anomalous aerial phenomena for private research institutes. They're analyzing materials for private research institutes. They're developing high pulse power supply and radiator tests, and that's for output off. They have these crazy Ghostbuster type devices to track this stuff. They call this the anomalous event detector right here. So they're doing big things. He's been associated with a lot of other stuff behind the scenes. He's up there in age, but he's one of these legendary scientists. I've been trying to talk to him. Some of my friends have, but I haven't had success doing it. But I would really love to pick his brain sometime. The next blog was Luis Elizondo again talking about these other UFO programs. Moving along, this was a kind of a breakthrough one. It got me a lot of attention when I wrote it. I was tipped off by some of my friends. Again, more with the UFO programs. There's a scientist named Bernard Haish, and basically when I hear these comments, I go around and I ask people who I think are in the know, and I try to figure out if these guys are legitimate. And sometimes it comes back and they are extremely, extremely legitimate. No, not everyone knows about them, and but they end up being huge government players, and Bernard Haish is one of them. He actually has a blog, and he wrote this, and not a whole lot of people noticed it until we talked about it. Here's the quote. Sources tell me that this is merely the tip of the iceberg, and he's talking about ATIP. He's saying a group of 4 related but separate unacknowledged side programs tracing back to 1947. So he said the number 4 also, which goes along with Jeremy Corbell and other people. So there really seems to be 4, at least 4 programs. They were housed as of the 1990s in major aerospace companies, such as Lockheed, Raytheon, and other aerospace corporations. These would be expensive programs, since the cost of secrecy can be several times higher than the research. ATIP has no relation to these 4 much better funded deep black ones. Indeed, the black programs collectively have budgets in the 10 billion range and up. Topics apparently include both reverse engineering and extraterrestrial biology. ATIP did find the UFO crash retrieval program via official channels, but was denied access to it because ATIP itself is not a special access program. Senator Harry Reid petitioned the Department of Defense to confer special access program status to ATIP, but the Department of Defense denied his request. We actually have that letter from Harry Reid. I'll show it to you in a little bit here, of him asking for ATIP to have special access program status. These special access programs are a huge story. The stuff is getting basically hidden. It could be in Lockheed, it could be in some of the Fort Worth offices, for all we know. Chris Mellon, who's a member of To the Stars Academy, he mentioned IRADs for the first time. IRADs are independent research and development activities. They're similar to the special access programs. A lot of people also talk about USAPs, which are unacknowledged special access programs. So not only do you have special access programs, you have unacknowledged special access programs that are even deeper than that. Mellon was kind of playing coy at the time. This was in 2016. I don't know if he still believes everything he said here, but he dropped the hint about the IRADs. Leslie Kane, who we just saw, asked Mellon if she thought it was impossible or possible to exempt government oversight for UFOs. And he said, I find it hard to imagine something as explosive as recovered alien technology remaining under wraps for decades. So while I have no reason to believe there is any recovered alien technology, I will say this. If it were me and I were trying to bury it deep, I'd take it outside government oversight entirely and place it in a compartment as a new entity with an existing defense company and manage it in what we call an IRAD, or Independent Research and Development Activity. So that blew us away, and this is what they're doing. Not only is there ATIP, but there's these special access programs. Grant Cameron chimed in, who's a big legend, and he was talking about Bender, who did the Politico article. Not only did the New York Times do the break the story, also Brian Bender from Politico, who was featured in the Unidentified series. He was talking about other programs. George Knapp has spoken on it multiple times, along with Harry Reid, even just a couple weeks ago. And Harry Reid said other programs that have been done and information they have, including different pieces of evidence. And I think it was interesting, he said pieces, because now we're going back into the metamaterials. One more thing, a quote from Tom DeLong. Recently, he said, "I will tell you this, I have met very, very high-ranking intelligence officials that have had encounters, direct encounters. Yeah, there's actually some unnerving aspects. There's one program where there's hundreds of operatives that have been having contact and they're trying to figure out what that's all about. It's wild." I'm just going to continue with basically Cliff Notes versions of some of these blogs, and you can always go to the website and read them for yourself. You can contact me on the contact page on the blog. I like to talk to people, and so feel free to. This blog here was the first time the new shape of UFO was talked about. It's Dave Fravor, that pilot, he was talking about his friends on the East Coast during the gimbal events, and they were seeing squares with circular auras around them, kind of like a cube and a beach ball. Some people think that they were military craft, others think they were definitely UFOs, but it definitely blew my mind. And this was on my website, and Dave Fravor was talking about it, Jeremy Corbell was talking about it before the New York Times had it in this last year. So that was big for us. We felt like, we kind of affected some things, because then the New York Times ran it about 6 months later. Not just because of us, they were working on it the whole time themselves, but it was cool for us to have it before the Times. This article here is called Experiencers' Unique Intuition and Biomarkers. This is the only article that I did not write that's on my website. Dr. Gary Nolan, who's a genius geneticist, and Dr. Kit Green, who's a longtime researcher and doctor of people that have been injured from the phenomenon. They basically gave this to some of the blogs. They could have given this story to the Times, to Leslie Kane, and they chose to give it to some blogs. And it's basically just talking about their work and how they're trying to prove that when your brain has extra connections in the paraplutinem area, which are highlighted right there, and a lot of experiencers have that, and you may have greater intuition, or you may have had human effects from seeing a craft, and they're trying to actually prove this in the labs now. I kind of butcher what they're talking about because it's very, very technical, and more on this will come out. There's other universities that are going through this now and trying to reproduce some of the results. Here you can see the normal brain versus a hyper brain from an experiencer. But this is amazing stuff, and they're trying to prove it. Don't take my word for it. Go and read the blog on that one. A lot of what I've been covering also is about the Defense Intelligence Reference Documents. There was 38 of them that were commissioned by the OSAP program, by scientists. Some of the scientists live in Texas. One of them I've spoken to, his name's Richard Obusi. Here's the list of the reference documents. They're on some really crazy stuff. Let's see, nuclear propulsion, microwave technology, space access, biosensors, invisibility cloaking, wormholes in space-time, field effects on biological tissues, that's the Kit Green one. Positron, aerospace, propulsion, vacuum energy, biomaterials, warp drives, and so on and so on. The argument is, were these scientists trying to figure out what UFOs were doing and wrote these? Some people think so, and then other people think that they were just kind of applying it to it after the fact. I think it was probably a mix of the two. Here's my most popular blog I ever wrote. It's called Metamaterials, Not From Earth. The Not From Earth stuff part I got a little bit of flack for, but regardless, this article is about metamaterials, and it stayed in the news. It's one of the biggest topics that the UFO community and now the greater world is speaking about. If you haven't read The American Cosmic Book by Diana Pasulka, she was actually taken to a crash site by government agents, supposedly, allegedly, and I would definitely read that book. It's called American Cosmic. Here's a quote from that book. It says, "It turns out that absurdity seems to have written into the fabric of the artifact. The artifact I had found with James and Taylor, those are aliases of scientists, or that was perhaps planted for me to find. It was analyzed by research scientists who concluded that it was so anomalous as to be incomprehensible. According to these scientists, I was told it could not have been generated or created on Earth." Jacques Vallée is doing a lot of studies along with Gary Nolan to study these. To the Stars Academy is studying them with their Atom project. And like Lou said in that video, if lights in the sky don't do it for people and all this other evidence doesn't do it for people, if we can get peer-reviewed scientists on board with these artifacts, then it's going to change everything. Chris Mellon, another member of To the Stars Academy, was talking in an interview years ago about a video, and it kind of got lost. I was able to dig it back up, and it's a really quick video. He thinks it's anomalous. Other people have tried to debunk it, and maybe it is an airplane or something, but a lot of people also think this is a genuine UFO video. It's really quick. But it was taken by, I think, Air Force or some sort of big telescope, so they're really taking it seriously at the time. A lot of people say ATIP ended. New York Times reported that, and then they said Lou Elizondo disagreed and it didn't. So this next blog was me putting together some quotes and facts about how ATIP didn't end. We later found out that it changed its name probably. It's probably not called ATIP anymore, but it's still going on. If you watch the Unidentified series, they actually speak to some of the current members. I wrote a blog about UFO databases. OSAP, one of their main goals was to build this huge database. It hasn't been publicly released yet, but if it does, it's going to change a lot of things. To the Stars Academy is currently doing an app called The Vault, and it's supposed to be their version of the database. I wrote another blog called UFOs in Water, USOs. Has anyone seen the Puerto Rican Aguadilla video, gun camera footage? I guess I'll show that real quick. It's really crazy. It shows this craft. This was taken, I think, by Homeland Security. Yeah. And again, you know, anyone can take videos with their phone and put them on YouTube, but when they're taken by government sources, it holds a lot more water. And so this craft is going into the water at some point, and it actually even looks like it's splitting in two. It's really crazy.
Did it cloak?
I think it just went under the water at that point.
Yeah.
I'm not an IR specialist, so I think some of this is going by heat and things like that. This one hasn't been co-signed by a government agent. It was leaked, but a lot of important people. This is where it looks like it splits into two. A lot of important people think this was a real video. We don't know for sure, but at this point, I think it's probably still one of the best ever captured. It's a lot longer than this, but I skipped ahead just for time constraints. But check this out. This is on the you can Google it, or you can go onto my blog and see it. I'll show one more video. I did a article about an experiencer named Chris Bledsoe. You may have heard of him. He's a friend of mine, and his experience woke a lot of people up. I can say that there's government agencies that are interested in what he experienced, and they're trying to build technology off of it. A lot of it is real hush-hush. Here he is at NASA. But his story is really amazing. He just popped out and is doing some more interviews this last week, and I'm going to try to be reporting on these. This is a video. Some people say it's a train. Some people say it's a UFO. What is interesting to me is Chris says that this looks like what he saw. So regardless if it's a train or if it's a real UFO, this is similar to what Chris saw. It's unlike any UFO video I've ever seen, and you can see the smoke swirling, and it's very odd looking. Again, it's really short and kind of blurry. A lot of times people speak of these auras around the craft. Over and over again we hear about the aura. This one seems to have an aura. I mean, maybe it's smoke from some sort of a train, but this is an example of a really weird looking aura. So that's why I thought it was unique, and it was unlike anything I had seen before. And they say maybe the aura is because they're bending space-time and they're doing things like that. They're not regular craft that are just flying. They're bending space-time around them. And that's how they're able to go in and out of the water and do what they do. They're able to go into space, go underwater, be in the sky, and everything like that. That, according to the person who recorded it, said it did, but the video cut off before it did, so we don't know for sure. This was an article that came out the day before the second New York Times piece. I didn't know that piece was coming out, but it was a similar article, so it got me a lot of attention. Basically, it was David Fravor talking about the East Coast events, saying that they were able to hover in place for hours on end, and normally they would have to be refueling or something like that. So is this more and more information about the East Coast now? Some of the pilots came out. They spoke to Leslie Kane in her second New York Times piece, and if you're interested in that, you can Google that or get on my website to read more about it. Congressman Walker was briefed. Most of the congressmen now have been briefed on UFOs, which is an amazing turn of events. Congressman Walker was so inspired after being briefed, he wrote a letter to I think it was the Navy, asking for more information, and he kind of got shut down. But I won't play his whole interview, but he said, if there is evidence, I believe it's important for people to, specifically in my position as a ranking member of the Terrorism Counterintelligence, we need to know what this is. So anytime one of these congressmen comes out and speaks, we get really happy about it, and because they're doing their diligence and they're helping the subject. Also, Congressman Warner said he was briefed. Trump said he was briefed. Trump's commented on a lot of this now too. He says he doesn't necessarily believe it, but that he believes the pilots, whatever that means, and that he's been briefed. Here's Warner saying he's been briefed.
Concern should we be about the briefing that you received on UFOs? Is that a concern for pilots? Is there anything you can mention to us about that?
Well, I think some of the press reports are accurate. I think people are taking this issue much more seriously, and I'm not going to get into any of the contents of the briefing. It was a classified briefing, but what I think one of the key takeaways I have is that the military and others are taking this issue seriously, which I think in previous generations may not have been the case.
So that's huge. I mean, we got senators going on record now that they're briefed.
Who was the astronaut that was taken down in Siberia?
I'm familiar with that one. Here's his letter if you wanted to read it. It's on my website, according, and also some other places. Mark Walker wrote to the Navy. There's been FOIAs of Elizondo emails showing that, in my opinion, showing that he was running ATIP. Some people said he wasn't running it. You know, there's always a lot of arguments. I wrote another blog on with defense writer Tyler Rogaway helping me out. And there's a lot of videos. If you want to see what kind of technology the United States has and why, and you're mad that we're only getting these blurry videos, well, here's a bunch of clear videos. They have the tech and they have some of these clear videos and they're not showing us. To the Stars Academy got onto an initiative about India and Pakistan. Some people are worried that the nuclear situation in India and Pakistan, they're going to misidentify UFOs as military action, and they're going to basically bomb each other. So To the Stars wrote letters to the Chief Justice in India and Pakistan. I was able to get release those exclusively. If you want to read those, one of them is from Dr. Pudoff from Austin. The other one's from Luis Elizondo, so that's cool. Big O Aerospace, who used to run Skinwalker, they released an orb video. It got everyone super angry because they didn't release a lot more information with it. But just the simple fact that they released it, I believe them because they know what they're doing. A lot of people say this is dust, and there's been a lot of arguments about it. We can see that real quick here. Oh, that's not playing. It'll be on my website though if you want to see it. I'm following who leaves and who stays at TTSA. They've had a couple important scientists leave, but they still support their initiative. This is the latest blog I wrote just a few days ago. I'll just go over this one and then we'll take questions.
You mind pointing out, just for anyone who's curious, who are the three people in that picture?
That's Tom DeLong on the left, who started To the Stars Academy. In the middle is Luis Elizondo, who is the face of To the Stars in a lot of ways now. And then on the right is Dr. Eric Davis from Austin. He's not a member of To the Stars Academy, but he works for Hal Pudoff, and he's one of the major players. These are all people that are saying the government has UFO artifacts. To the Stars already says that they do, and Jacques Vallée says he does, and other people. But I wanted to focus on the fact that the government's had this stuff, and maybe even whole crafts, for many, many years. So the New York Times, obviously Leslie Kean, they were talking about it in 2017. Jacques Vallée says he's heard the rumors. Here's some quotes from Dr. Diana Pasulka's American Cosmic book. The scientists James and Tyler believed they had evidence, not just faith, to support their belief in the extraterrestrial source of the artifacts and the authenticity of the crash. Then she goes on to say, we were an unlikely team, two scientists who believed they had physical evidence of off-planet intelligence and a professor of religious studies. And then they were talking about having it in their labs. Dr. Hal Pudoff said this during a presentation. He's had clearances, I think, for 40 years, government clearances. He said, so let me give you an example of how this stuff helps people who are chasing these difficult problems. I'm choosing one here, metamaterials for aerospace use. I'd love to talk about really fancy materials, but they're classified. So I thought that was pretty telling when he said that. Luis Elizondo, he went on the Tucker Carlson show, a nationally televised news program, and I'll play this.
Thank you for having me.
So, the military...
Is it possible these things are a foreign adversarial?
I mean, that would be the terrestrial explanation. Just assign off the top of your head a likelihood of that being the case, if these are Russian or Chinese.
You know, Tucker, you don't want me to give my opinion. The one thing I learned in intelligence, there's a lot. You can be absolutely sure of something and be absolutely wrong.
Of course,
so
it's happened to me many times. But it sounds. I guess just to sort of put a bow on it.
I think it's a low probability.
That's it. Okay.
It's a very low probability. Look, we have the most sophisticated weapon systems right now on the face of the planet, and we can identify not only a 737 or a MiG-25 or a F-22. We can tell you even what airline it is, and the difference between the models of aircraft within that type of aircraft. So I think it's highly unlikely that a foreign adversary was successful in developing something like this.
So let me ask you one last question. Do you believe, based on your decade of serving in the U.S. government on this question, that the U.S. government has in its possession any material from one of these aircrafts?
I do, yes.
You think the U.S. government has debris from a UFO in its possession right now?
Unfortunately, Tucker, I really have to be careful of my NDA. I really can't go into a lot of more detail on that.
Okay.
But simply put, yes.
So that was a big deal. I mean, that was national TV, and he's a government, an ex-government employee, and he's on the record saying it. Tucker went on to ask Trump, and Trump kind of denied knowledge of it, but it was a huge deal. I mean, they asked the sitting president during an interview if he knew about UFO crashes and that the government has them. Eric Davis, after that interview, a friend of mine, James Iandoli, asked Eric Davis what he thought, and Eric Davis said this: Luis Elizondo's very brief answer to Tucker Carlson's question about whether the U.S. government is in possession of recovered, crashed, and landed UFO technology hardware is 1,000% accurate. My national security NDAs prevent me from adding any further comment on this. My friend James, I was talking to him, and he said, Eric Davis, he gave him a quote, and then he said, no, wait, let's go back and add in landed UFO technology. So it's not only crashed, some of these are just landed. Some people think the phenomenon is giving them to us to study, and others, maybe they really did crash, but we don't know, but they're there. Eric Davis also believes some of the Philip Corso story, if anyone's familiar with that, about him ceding technology to, again, aerospace companies. Some of that became convoluted and embellished over time, that story, but the core story, I think, is true. I go into detail about these SAPs, Special Access Programs, Unacknowledged Special Access Programs, and the IRADs in this article. It's very confusing stuff, and I don't claim to understand it all, but really everything that everyone I talk to and everything is pointing to not only the government, but they're hiding it in special access programs like Lockheed Martin. Tom DeLong thinks so. I go back over the Bernard Haish quotes, the Chris Mellon quotes, Dr. Kit Green again, and I only follow people I think are 100% legitimate. And so Dr. Kit Green, he doesn't always agree on what exists, whether UFOs exist or not, but he knows that the special access programs have a lot of things secret. Former Senator Harry Reid, he's been on record a lot of different times, and he even wrote this letter to Deputy Secretary of Defense asking for ATIP, which was already a UFO program, to become a special access program because they wanted access to the crash materials and all this other evidence. So I'll stop there. Like I said, contact me on my page anytime you want, and we'll talk about it and read some of these articles. We'll take some questions.
Right, yeah, so let's go ahead. If you guys have questions, we'll start kind of interacting a little bit. Let's start with Les over here.
What is your thoughts about Stephen Greer?
I think he invented something called CE5, and everything that I see, I believe it's real, the CE5 stuff. In my opinion, then he started saying a lot of things that were unprovable. There's something called the Wilson document, that was a whole other story, that proved that what he was doing in the late 90s when they were meeting up with politicians, Stephen Greer was one of the first people to start talking about the USAPs, the Unacknowledged Special Access Programs. That was a huge breakthrough. So he's done historic work, and then at some point now, he's done a lot more things I don't agree with. He's saying things I don't agree with, taking shots at people, and I don't know if it's jealousy or maybe he's accurate. We don't know for sure, but I don't really subscribe to a lot of his beliefs anymore. But what he did over time is historic, and inventing that CE5 stuff, I don't know if it's good for people to do. Basically, CE5 is when you contact orbs and UFOs through meditation and other things. I don't know if that's a good idea. I have some friends that swear by it and really think it's great, and they have a lot of interactions. I probably wouldn't do it myself. I've kind of toyed with the idea, but he invented that in a way, and it seems to really work. So.
Yeah, the thing I just saw, the latest clip from the Sirius video, and he basically is saying that, hey, we got all this super craft that we can do anything, and of course, if you believe what Rich said from the Skunk Works, that we can take ET home, you start thinking, well, if ATIP is reinventing the wheel in a way, I mean, if Rear knows all this stuff and supposedly has sources that he's worked with, it's like these two should get together.
They don't like each other. Greer is very vocal about saying ATIP and TOSTARS is a government scam in a way. I don't agree with him at all about that. Lou Elizondo, he found out a lot of things when he was with the government, and he can't say them because he has NDAs. In a lot of ways, he does have to reinvent the wheel in the public realm. Mm-hmm. So he'll know something's true, and he has to find evidence of it in the public in order for us to
Yep.
Yes, sir.
What was the religious group objecting to? The UFO thing and the Skinwalker stuff?
It's a nickname. Some people call them the Collins Elite, but it's a loose nickname. It's not really what they call themselves.
The what elite?
The Collins Elite. Daniel's friend Nick Redfern, the author, has written the most about them. So if you're interested in that, I will check out some Nick Redfern books.
It's not something that a lot of people know about.
And basically what it boils down to is some people object to studying UFOs, studying paranormal for religious beliefs. And they could be right. I'm not judging them. I personally think that we should be studying it no matter what. But maybe we shouldn't be doing CE5 or some of this other stuff.
Who are they? Who are these religious?
They're not. It's politicians. They haven't been named. George Knapp has, in a way, threatened that their names will come out eventually. So we may end up finding out about some of these politicians that killed some of these UFO programs, killed OSAP. Now, there's still all these black programs that they probably weren't allowed to touch. But basically, OSAP went from a general paranormal program to a only focused on UFOs as a military threat because they thought that was more nuts and bolts.
Well, did that religious group accept just studying the UFO stuff?
They accepted the ATIP, yes, but even ATIP, in a way, got their funding cut, and then they got more funding. But yeah, they succeeded in cutting OSAP funding.
The first I heard about the Collins Elite was not what we're hearing about them now. They were an assassin group.
I haven't heard about any assassinations, but never can rule anything out in the whole
But that's what I heard about originally, that's what they were formed for.
May I ask how you're interested to do the CE5 stuff?
I just don't know personally what they're messing with it. I only can listen to people's comments and people I respect. Some people say don't mess with it because you're letting it into your life and you don't want to do that. Other people say it's beautiful and they're angels and you should be doing it. So I just report both sides. I don't know for a fact what's going on. The CE5 is where you basically meditate, pray, whatever you want to call it, and I'm probably messing up the explanation of it, but then you are able to see orbs.
There's a group that gets together here in the DFW area, and like Denny said, they'll go out to a location and they'll have various meditations, a lot like mantras that they'll all recite together, and they're hoping to initiate contact with some phenomenon, whether it's like you said, an orb or an actual ship. Any indication they can get that correlates what they're doing to something appearing above them, they like to try to repeat that. They try to use that as a means of making consistent and effective contact, like to say. But so if you're interested in doing that, there are groups that go around here in the area to various sites. So,
Mark?
Yeah, you guys mentioned this Leslie Kane individual. Can you give more on her background and also what this groundbreaking book is that she published in 2010, and also Mark Warner's letter to the Navy? What was the response to that, if there was any?
Leslie Kane, she's the New York Times author. She also wrote the book UFOs and I can't remember.
Pull it up here.
Yeah, she wrote a really great UFO book, and
the title is UFOs, and then has a subtitle
Yeah.
where she goes into great detail of a lot of decorated military officers who basically kind of paved the way for what you're seeing now, and a lot of the different I guess, like Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project, he brought up a lot of people to come forward and have a sort of mock hearing. She was kind of doing that in a way that a lot of people, you know, there are people who write books on a lot of these things and get witness testimony from regular citizens. She was doing that at a government and military level back, and this was in 2010, way before the announcement of ATIP or any of this stuff. So that's something that I think lends her a lot of, in her journalism career, a lot of credibility in talking to the people who society generally deems have more credibility and more just status when it comes to reporting on this stuff, rather than just whoever from wherever. So that's one of the things that we can pull up here in a moment. But,
the book is UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record.
Yeah, and she wrote the New York Times piece, both of them, because there was two big ones. The first big one happened in late 2017. I wouldn't be here probably if it wasn't for that, and if it wasn't for Lou Elizondo coming forward with the ATIP program. And that New York Times piece just changed everything, because they also released those two videos along with To the Stars Academy, and then the third one months later. The Mark Walker letter that he wrote to, I think it was like the Secretary of the Navy or something like that, they basically told him to kick rocks. And you can see that response from the Navy. I think it's on my website. If not, I can send it to you, or you can Google it. But it was really amazing and great that Mark Walker went out of his way to do interviews and write that letter and then release that letter to the public. Sir?
When do you anticipate, or do you anticipate a time frame for the release of information about nanomaterials?
It's a good question. There's different groups working on it. Dr. Gary Nolan and Jacques Vallée, they're going the peer review route. So that can take, I think, years, maybe less. But other scientists have to look at it, and it's a real serious process.
The challenge that they're looking at is that do we now have the technology to understand what we're looking for?
I think now they're starting to develop it, and Dr. Gary Nolan is on the forefront of that. There's also other machines that they're using to do it. To the Stars Academy, like Daniel was saying at the beginning, they recently signed that CRADA with the Army, and so now they have the Army machines. But some of these it's also proprietary tech, and Dr. Gary Nolan is the best at that. But and it's very expensive to test some of this stuff. People think you can just send it to a lab and get results back in a couple weeks or something, but it just doesn't work like that. And even if you do get results back like that, they need to be reproducible, and you need to have other scientists on board. So that's really what we're waiting for, is these results to come back.
2015 program by the Navy identifying some UFOs that went to the water and streamed to them. Can you comment on that?
Are you talking about the gimbal? The 2015 gimbal? I think that's what you mean. Yeah, that was the gimbal video that we showed. That was an event. It was happening over the course of months, and there's the gimbal, that rotating craft, and that was more of like a saucer with points on end. Then there was the cubes and spheres, and there was a lot of those. Those are more debated. Some people think that they were black budget, crafts that the United States had, but they were seeing those all the time. There was also, I think, orbs, maybe even Foo Fighter-ish craft on the East Coast. And there's reports of something around 50 or 60 pilots and other personnel have seen them.
This was on the West Coast. This was
the West Coast was the Tic Tac in 04.
Okay.
That was 15 years ago, so maybe that's why you said 2015.
Okay. Yeah, and the Tic Tac was in 04. That was with the David Fravor. And then actually the Go Fast video is also off the East Coast, the same events. I've got some pretty good sources that there's a lot more videos from those events, and like I said, the gimbal video shoots off at a high rate of speed, and we don't get to see that in the video, which is really unfortunate, because that would have convinced a lot more people. But the military has to protect their ways and means, and they have reasons for what they're doing.
I'll just mention really quick, Ken brought up something earlier about the Tic Tac that you see in those videos, which are very blurry and not all that great condition. They've all been doctored for public release and shortened probably a great extent. A lot of the people who Danny's talked to and I've talked to, some of the people that were there, Navy personnel, say that not only do videos exist in high definition and real clarity that you can see everything, but that the object had small prongs that came off the bottom that were like small legs or feet or something, and so you can't really make sense of that in the picture that you see that's on in the public domain. But somewhere out there, someone has those tapes, and they said that what was weird about that is, and this is something that's coming out a lot in these recent articles, is that the Navy that was there on the Nimitz aircraft carrier, and there was a Princeton, which is a smaller vessel, they basically, there's people who say that soon after the event, or soon after they made the effort to go intercept these things and came back, they had Air Force personnel come and retrieve the data or allegedly maybe even erase it. But what was interesting is they said it was Air Force, because they stood out, because these are all Navy guys, and when they see people in Air Force uniforms coming, they knew something's up. And that's not the first time, apparently, that something like that has happened, where Air Force or some covert group comes in and wants to erase data. So these Navy guys, some of them anyway, say that for sure people came and wanted the data tapes. So someone knew, I think, what they were watching. That's something we need to see if that will ever be released. We don't know. Well, obviously the high def. But
they had some kind of a program on TV or on the internet I saw. It showed, and they talked about they were going out on a break and they had different types of lights that were coming in groups, and they thought, they wasn't sure about it, they sent a Navy plane up to look at them and challenge them, and they saw things one side. And then they showed exactly what you described. They looked like the round or the kind of cylinder shape, with little prongs underneath, and they showed them going in the water even.
Right.
And coming out. So it was,
well, the guy who sent a lot of people know about the pilot, who you saw talking earlier about whether if we had the technology to replicate that. He was sent up because of another man named Kevin Day, who was operating the radar, and he gave them the go-ahead to send him up there, send up their top guys. And so he's looking at this radar that has an indication of targets. And before they sent up anything or made any kind of response, they thought maybe this could be a glitch. Let's shut it down, reboot it, which isn't just like a flip of the switch. This took a long time. And then as soon as it all came back on and loaded all up again, all of the targets were still there. So they determined it wasn't a glitch and they needed to send someone up to figure it out. And you have people on the deck who are looking through the big eyes, the telescopes and stuff to try to make contact. And these things are going from like 80,000 feet to like 20,000 in like less than a second, and then to the water. And they think that there could be an underwater component too. So there's a lot of intriguing things just about that. But it only makes you wonder, like, how many other times has that happened that we just don't know because it hasn't been shared in big articles. So, any more questions up here?
Yeah, just back to Steve Greer one more time. What is your opinion about his focus on zero-point energy technology?
I don't remember exactly what he said about it. I know he says that we have all these UFOs, the government has all this technology already.
Well, he's saying we should have zero-point energy and get off oil and gas.
Oh yeah, that would be great. I would love that.
He's been talking about that for a long time.
Yeah, I mean that would be great. And a lot of people think that that's what's going to happen with disclosure, is that there's this other technology that's going to save the planet that comes out. I'm not so sure that's the case, but I would love it if it happens. I don't know what we've accomplished behind the scenes. It's highly debated. Do we have these, UFO craft in some garage somewhere? That not ones that we found, but ones that we built ourselves. I don't know. I do probably think that we have crash craft or even landed craft, but have we been able to figure it out and reproduce it? I'm not so sure.
All right, anybody else? I just want to make a mention. We talked about Leslie earlier and her involvement down at Rice University this last week, and it was a private. I just want to mention this to you guys because this is a cool opportunity for next year. This time it was a private gathering in the humanities department, but they've invited her and a few other people back so that they can have a conference that's open next year down in Houston at Rice University. So that's a really great opportunity if you guys are around the area. It's going to be in October. Just to think that an academic institution is not only offering for people to come and listen about something otherwise, which usually doesn't get a lot of attention in schools and universities. This is going to be hearing from people who have a real involvement, and I think it's something that we can all learn from and see, hopefully, other institutions start to pick up more on. So I think it's a good opportunity for you guys. We'll get more on that. And I also wanted to say thanks to Danny for coming, and I want you guys to help just give a round of applause for him, because this is his first public event.
If you liked this video, be sure to check out our other content and get connected on our page and social media sites. Every day, new discoveries are being made all across the world and beyond. So let's work together to find out what's next. And remember, we won't know if we don't go. I'll see you in the vortex.